Please welcome Darren Walker and Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome to the Ford Foundation Center for Social Justice. I am so delighted that you are all here. We need this moment. We need this occasion at a time when it is so easy to be dispirited, depressed, dejected, disgusted. We need reasons for hope. We need to be inspired. We need to believe in what is possible in spite of the seeming darkness around us. We need to lean into the light. And this extraordinary woman who I have known and admired for 2 decades has been a source of light for me. And we are going to talk about, among the things she has accomplished, is this book. This book, Say Her Name, is deep and profound. And we're going to have a conversation about that. And I just want to say thank you, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, because you are a national treasure. In the tradition of many of the Black sheroes who have preceded us, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ida B. Wells, Phyllis Wheatley. These were women who were patriots. They believed in this country when this country did not believe in them. They were able, in spite. I remember the image of Fannie Lou Hamer, Mrs. Hamer, walking down a dirt road in that raggedy linen dress, all that she had, carrying an American flag, and being told that she was unpatriotic and that she was a scourge for what she believed and fought for. You are in a firmament of amazing Americans. And so we thank you. We want to talk about this book, and we're going to get into that. But I want to give you an opportunity to say a few words and introduce the rest of the program.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
I'm going to read a passage from the book. I'm standing in an air-conditioned auditorium thinking about Michelle Cusseaux and the countless other Black women killed by the police, whose deaths no one was paying attention to. My audience on this balmy spring day is mostly made up of public interest lawyers, students, and faculty. I am remembering the courage that Michelle's mother, Fran Garrett, exhibited after Phoenix police killed Michelle in her own home. Michelle's story, like those of too many others, would have ended when Sergeant Percy Dupross stole her life had she not been born to a tenacious mother who refused to let her daughter's name be forgotten. Fran was determined that her daughter's life and death would not be reduced to obscurity, another statistic that no one counted. Michelle was killed just 5 days after a cop gunned down Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. After seeing the community protests taking shape there, Fran decided to march Michelle's casket to Phoenix City Hall. In this brave act of protest, she joined a powerful tradition of Black women resisting and denouncing the state violence that directly threatens them and all too often destroys their families. Fran's march to the Phoenix City Hall was a flare in the night. Fran's radical act, literally placing her daughter's casket at the door of municipal power, not only demanded that Michelle be seen, but also rendered visible the police killings of other Black women. The sorrowful procession of Michelle's coffin to City Hall left a searing image that spoke to the many ways in which Black women's fate has been left in the hands of police, while their stories have been marginalized and sometimes erased. While Michael Brown's killing justifiably sparked a wave of nationwide protests over lethal police shootings of Black men, the killing of Black women like Michelle had yet to be memorialized in widespread activations and denunciations. Fran offered a powerful and moving witness to the fact that Black women were also losing their lives in circumstances that spoke to the disregard of Black life and family bonds. There was no sound reason for their stories to be banished to the shadows of our collective consciousness, mere afterthoughts in the litany of savagery that has come to constitute anti-Black state violence. Fran's act reminded us all of the obvious fact that slain women's mothers don't grieve for them any less, their children don't cry for them any less, their siblings don't mourn them any less, and we should not protest their killings any less than we do the killings of their brothers, their fathers, and their sons. 6 months later, as I look out at the audience, I wonder who among them will know Michelle Cusseau's name. Would they know any other daughters who were stolen like Fran's was? Or was the erasure of these horrific losses difficult to interrupt because of the reflexive ways that the very notion of anti-Black police violence defaults almost exclusively to our endangered sons? To make the patterns of erasure visible and audible, I invite the audience to join me in doing something new. I ask those audience members who are able to do so to stand. I tell them, when you hear a name you don't recognize, take a seat and remain seated. I promise to invite the last person standing to tell the seated audience what they know about the person whose name no one recognized. Then I call out the names, slowly, deliberately, and loud enough for even those seated in the back of the auditorium to hear. Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, Freddie Gray. I'm always a bit surprised when 1 or 2 people don't even recognize the first few names. But fewer than a handful have taken their seats by the time I lift up Freddie Gray. The vast majority of people recognize these men and know the common risks that link their fates. They are Black and did not survive an encounter with the police. I pause for a moment and I ask the audience to look around. The room is quiet and still. People take in what they have demonstrated. Group literacy about the vulnerability of Black people to police violence. At the moment, it seems a completely obvious reading of the social knowledge that is minimally necessary to ground any conceivable collective action. I continue. I say, Michelle Cusseau. And then comes that whoosh of dozens, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of people taking their seats. It is the sound of silence. The sounds of people taking their seats mount as I continue the roll call. Tanisha Anderson, Ayanna Stanley Jones, Kayla Moore, India Kager, Shelley Fry, Corinne Gaines. One person is left standing after India Kager, but I continue anyway so people can hear more names. At last, I release the last person from any obligation to speak. I remind everyone that I'm a law professor after all, and I only say the last person standing will tell us something about the name that they recognize to ensure everyone's honesty throughout the exercise. There are nervous titters as the last person takes their seat. This moment releases some of the tension in the room. Yet the point still hangs over us. The silence about Black women who've been killed by the police has distorted our collective capacity to respond. We cannot address a problem we cannot name. And we cannot name it if the stories of these women are not heard. I now want to welcome artist Kim Yancey to read an excerpt from the book from Rhonda Dormius, mother of Corinne Gaines, and valued member of the Say Her Name Mothers Network. Rhonda's daughter, Corinne, was a 23-year-old mother and poet who was killed by a police officer in her home in Randallstown, Maryland in 2016. When Baltimore County Police Officer Royce Ruby fired into her home, he also injured Corinne's 5-year-old son. A jury later awarded Gaines' family a $37 million award for wrongful death. That judgment was overturned by a trial judge, but has later been reinstated on appeal.
My name is Rhonda Dormius. Corinne was my 23-year-old baby. Oh, she was a very, very feisty young lady from toddlerhood. Very outspoken, kind of bossy at times. Well, she was just matter of fact. Growing up, she did very well in school and excelled in all her classes. She went to a college prep high school called Baltimore City College High School, and she was interested in political science. And during her senior year, she lost interest in political science because there were so many things going on in society that contradicted what she was being taught. So I think that was the beginning of her starting to reach out and learn more about the government outside of what was made available through the media. She wanted to go behind the scenes and do her own research. Oh, she was an avid reader. Oh my God, I could buy this girl 10 books in a week and she would go through them. She read urban novels, but she also read books about Marcus Garvey and other informative things. She graduated on time, and she chose to go to Morgan State University. She only stayed 2 semesters. Then she found out she was gonna have Cody. So I started looking at different colleges that would allow young mothers to have their children because I wanted her to stay in school. But then she was like, oh, Ma, you know, that's gonna be too much. So she directed her attention to her other passion. She got a cosmetology license and started doing hair and makeup. Oh, and she enjoyed it. She bought 2 homes as rental properties that she used for income, and she bought her own vehicle. Oh, she was independent. Now, after Michael Brown, there was a whole snowball effect of police murders. Freddie Gray was a neighbor of ours. Now, I didn't personally know him, but I knew him from the neighborhood, and it was literally a few blocks away. Everything that unfolded was literally around the corner from where she grew up. That was our community. And our community had been robbed. She was an activist role model. And she wanted to teach because she was self-taught. She just wanted to enlighten the masses about things that were going on around her. She has a few spoken word poems that are out. Now, she would always do her little rants on Facebook or Instagram about things that were going on in the world. Justice for Corinne. What does it look like? It looks like an officer shouldn't be allowed to make lateral moves within the department if they've had other issues. You know, this was not Royce Ruby's first shooting. Justice for me is getting officers better training, making sure that they adhere to policy and not create new ones as they go along. The officer who shot Corinne was found not guilty because of the statute of such and such and such of the police code or this and that. Oh, they chose not to indict the officers. In September 2016, an internal police investigation concluded that Officer Ruby, who had previously been involved in a fatal shooting, was justified in shooting Corinne Gaines and would not be charged. He was subsequently promoted. Well, we went to civil trial. It was February 2nd, 2018. It was 4 white jurors, 2 black jurors, who came up with their own settlement amount of $37 million. And they came up with that money based on the information that was presented from evidence. The county appealed. And on February 15th, 2019, the day before the anniversary of the settlement, the judge decided to overturn it based on qualified immunity, which had been on the table 3 times before the trial even started. Oh, he did that because he never expected us to win. He never argued for us to have qualified immunity because he didn't expect us to win based on the circumstances around the case. Well, once the jury heard all of the evidence, they came back with $37 million, the jurors. So that says a lot. Well, needless to say, we are going to appeal. Oh, it is not about the money. We have to get the truth out there. When they decided to decline criminal charges, oh, they thought that we were going to go away. They want us to go away. I just want everybody to know that the fight continues. And there is no dollar amount that can remotely replace what we have lost. I can do without the dollars. I want accountability. I want the police involved to be held accountable. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for all of us and say, I want them to pay. I want them to feel our pain. They need to know. They need to come from behind the wall of protection and be held accountable. That's what I want. Corinne felt like she was in a fight by herself. Oh, so she would be so happy that I am continuing her fight. In her last hours, she felt like she was alone because that's the way the stage was set for her to feel alone. And I am going to continue battling for her because she had a message to get out. It wasn't received by everyone in the way that she wanted to present it, but I'm going to clear it up for her. I am going to deliver it the way I know she would want it to be delivered.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Kim Yancey, that was extraordinary. So grateful to you. All right, it's now time to bring out Rhonda. Rhonda Domius, please, would you join us? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your courage and your leadership. Professor Crenshaw, as we think about what we just heard and as I read this book, talk a little bit about the origins. I mean, obviously, your opening statement, your reading spoke to this, but very specifically, why a book?
Well, you know, one of the things that we talk about a lot in Say Her Name with the mothers is what we call the loss of the loss, namely mothers, daughters, sisters, they lose their loved ones. But they also lose the story. They lose the recognition, the awareness that actually something has happened that the community needs to be aware of, needs to be mobilized by, needs to speak to. And so we were noticing that no one knew these stories. Even the mothers didn't know when they came together that they weren't the only one.
Yes.
And so there is a need for the story to stand in the space of erasure. There's a need for a name to be able to hold that space. There's a need for the imperative to bear witness. We were recognizing that we could say her name until we turned blue.
Yes.
But if people didn't know the stories, they weren't going to be able to remember the names. They weren't going to be able to hold it. They weren't going to be able to bear witness. So we decided that beyond what we do annually, which is come together during the anniversary of Say Her Name, and spend time together, we needed to create a document, we needed to create a record, we needed to create an artifact that people could hold on to. So we decided that we were going to take all of the interviews that we'd been doing, the records of the focus groups that we were doing, some of the exercises that we did with the moms. Many times we would say, bring your daughter into the room. Let's have a conversation as though you were talking with her on the phone. Or what kind of humorous thing would she say to you? So we could get a three-dimensional picture of the lost women. Our goal in all of it was not to create a memorial of the worst day of their lives, but a full three-dimensional picture of who they were and who they were becoming, where they were going. So all of this material was part of what we put together as interviews. So each loved one was brought into our consciousness by their mothers or their daughters, and in some case, their sisters, and then pair that with an analysis of why are we doing this? What is this vulnerability a product of? Why is it that this particular vulnerability is so marginalized, not just within society writ large, not just within the newspapers, but also within our own consciousness about what anti-Black police violence actually looks like. So each story comes with an analysis and then information about how we develop the ritual that we're going to do.
And it's very, I mean, I think, again, like so much of your academic work, very well researched and very rigorous in the way you actually present the data and then bring in the narrative. But you decided to build a campaign. So this is not just like one of your academic publications where you're really trying to advance knowledge and scholarship and research and policy, but you actually have built a campaign around Say Her Name.
Yeah. Well, you know, I never considered myself one of the traditional academics that just likes to sit in the office and assume the position, right? For me, thinking and knowledge is designed to deliver tools and prisms to be able to understand our world better in order to transform it. So Say Her Name was initially a chant that we were, demanding during the Eric Garner protests. When we went to, AAPF went to the march with a banner of many black women who'd been killed by the police, and many people just didn't know their names. So we were saying, say her name, and trying to chant along with some of the other chants, but people just didn't know. And I would say that some people were encouraging. They would give us the thumbs up, like, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Some people were shocked because they really do think that gender somehow protects black women from anti-black racism, particularly from racist violence, and that's just never been the case, and it's not the case now. And so a lot of those folks stood there and took the pictures and wrote down the names. They wanted to know more. And then there was another group. That group was clearly upset that we were bringing this issue into the march and into the discourse about anti-black police violence. We were interlopers in their conception of what the problem really is. And I think it was that mix of responses that made it clear that this was not just something to be done in a day. It wasn't just a banner, that there had to be a deeper effort to elevate for people who are unaware about all of the things that happen to African American women historically and now. So it had to be information. It had to come with an imperative. It had to come with recognizable rituals in the community so we could see this and own it as our own. So all of those things came together, and so the book is more or less a reflection of those different dimensions of Say Her Name.
Ms. Dormies, one of the things in the book that is wonderful is that you talk about how your daughter was joyful. She was a positive person. She was optimistic. She was hopeful. And yet, when I was hearing the words just a few minutes ago, I was somewhat paralyzed by the power of your words. But those were your words,
Yes.
spoken by a great actress. To talk about how you experienced that.
Yes. Well, one, I'd like to make reference to art and artivism. Kim Yancey does the whole artivism aspect a great service because it allows people who haven't lived the tragedy to experience it without going through it. You know, with every word she speaks, it's an expression of what I felt and what I still feel. It's visceral for me. Without it, people really won't have a clear understanding of what this path looks like for all of the mothers involved with the Say Her Name campaign. We need it because we need people to truly understand what it's like. We need to know, they need to know the importance of this fight for us. Dr. Kim has done an amazing job with highlighting everything for us. You know, unbeknownst to us in the beginning, we didn't know that this campaign was going to lead to this because we started out small. But she's a genius. I always tell her that. She incorporated all of our words into this book. So you're getting it from the horse's mouth. The media has no part in this, and that's the main thing, is that we have to control the narrative, because you'll hear things on the news and you will tend to believe it because of where it's coming from. But again, this information is from the horse's mouth, and she demonstrated that in the book.
So true. So, Professor Crenshaw, you describe in the book the public silence surrounding police killings of black women. And you talk about conspiracies of silence. Mm-hmm. You talk about dispassionate complacency. These are harsh terms. What do you mean?
Well, I guess what I've seen, what I've witnessed, the contrast between the reality of these of grief and trauma and loss and its erasure in public discourse. That's not a neutral. That's not just a not there. That is something that sends a message that we are complacent with being careless, with not seeing, not being willing to bear witness, not being willing to sit with the consequences of practices that we could do something about if we had a critical mass of people who said enough is enough. My deeper worry was what signal is being sent to police and other institutions when we don't march, when it's our mothers and our sisters and our daughters, when no one has to worry about whether there's going to be a protest, right? It's like, oh, it was that mother, or it was the woman who was having a mental health crisis. It wasn't a character that fits within a narrative that we're used to recognizing. And when I see this playing out over and over and over again, the failure to recognize some of the conditions of life for Black women since we arrived here, when I remember some of the consequences of that failure, right? One of these consequences is sitting on the Supreme Court, but that's a different project. A different narrative, a different woman, but the same problem. We don't recognize the consequences of intersectional forms of anti-Black racism. We don't recognize it and we don't lift it up. And so that gives the sense that this is collateral damage that we're willing to tolerate. What you don't stand up for is what you're willing to tolerate. And too many times we don't stand up for Black women when they're subject to all forms of violence, but especially when they're subject to police violence. So the goal was to call it out, right? My commitment over the course of my career has been to name things. If you can't name something, it's still kind of just in the ether.
Well, you framed things. I mean, your work has actually helped us to see things we couldn't see, or to organize a thesis for understanding what this diagnosis is and why it exists.
Yeah.
In this case, I think it is very challenging because the narrative around anti-Black violence, particularly police and law enforcement, state violence, is so through the lens of Black men and their experience. And I think even within our own community,
Especially,
we have work to do.
especially.
So I would like both Ms. Domis and you to speak to this issue in our community. You have both lived in our community, and you know exactly what I speak.
Yeah.
How do we address this?
Well, I can use an example because I have friends who came from the same area, neighborhood that I lived in, and they didn't even know about the police brutality that has been placed upon women. It was like it's a growing situation, but if we don't teach people and make them aware of what's going on, they won't know. We have to keep putting the information out there because people who are not exposed to it is blind to it. They just don't want to accept the fact that there is corruption within our law enforcement departments. To hear people say, "Oh my God, I never thought that officers could behave like that." Well, they do, and because it's not brought out, it's not placed on your lap, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And that's the main thing: is just getting the information out there, making people aware that it is there.
And in our own communities, because just to be totally, honest, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, these sometimes are Black cities.
Yes.
With Black police chiefs.
Yes.
And Black police officers.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that. And I'll say that, I think one of the reasons why we have such an uphill battle about talking honestly about police violence in general, and particularly with respect to women, is that the images that we have of anti-Black violence are gendered from the start, right? It's not that they're not gendered. They're gendered in a particular way. So lynching is sort of the framework that we operate from. Yeah. And our historical memory of lynching is of Black men. It's of constraining and punishing expressions of Black sexuality. Now, there's a whole nother story about what lynching was really about. But it is the way it's coded in our memory. There is no space in that coding for the things that happened to Black women. Both the fact that they too were subject to anti-Black police violence, both, or anti-Black vigilante violence, both in terms of lynching, but also in terms of sexual violence. We don't talk about sexual violence, particularly sexualized violence from the police, even though that's the second most common complaint against the police, right? So this is one of these situations, I call them intersectional failures. We have one way of talking about the racial problem that doesn't include the way Black women experience it. We have another way of talking about the gender problem, right? Violence against women that doesn't talk about this particular kind of violence against women, which is disproportionately something that Black women face. So we've got to broaden our frameworks, right? We've got to think about anti-Black violence outside of what happens exclusively to men. And I always have to say this, and I can never say it too much, so let me say it now. I am not saying that too much attention is being placed on African-American men. There's still not enough attention placed on the kind of violence that African-American men face. There's also a need to recognize that there is virtually no attention paid to the kind of violence that African-American women face at the hands of the state. So we can do both of these better.
And I think your point that we cannot allow the white supremacist apparatus that pits Black men and Black women
to make us do that, right? Exactly.
And so I think the larger point of your campaign is also about the narrative, the storytelling. Both of you speak to this issue because I know the plans around teaching history, sociology, women's studies, racial studies. Talk about what your aspiration is for this campaign in this book and the materials that you've created that go along with it.
Yeah. Well, initially the aspiration was to provide a record, a calling in, here's how, historical contextualization so we can understand where this comes from. So there are chapters in which we deal with the contested history of Black motherhood. Why so many of our sisters are killed in the presence of their children. Right? So the lack of compassion, the lack of value, the age-old belief that Black mothers are not invested in their children, where did that come from? It came from the need to create an assumption about Black familial bonds that allowed them to be broken in order for human beings to be marketed. That's a carryover of enslavement that is gendered, and we don't really have currently a way of identifying how it still lives.
It goes back in some ways. I remember reading Thomas Jefferson's words about Phillis Wheatley's poems.
Yes.
And he said, a Black woman is incapable of articulating this depth of emotional connection.
Yes.
And again, in the service of
rendering
rendering enslaved women and men subhuman in order to justify.
Absolutely.
But this notion of a lack of capacity to have an emotional or psychological sense of connection that any mother would have was denied from the very beginning.
Yes.
And there has not been a moment of reckoning with that. I often say that we haven't had Juneteenth yet for Black women. We haven't had that moment, right? We're talking about forced reproduction, coerced mass production of human beings. What ideologically did that require us to think about Black women, their sexuality, their autonomy, their attachment to their children? When have we had that conversation? We've not had that conversation, right? So this is one of the dimensions that forms the backdrop of the reason why Royce Ruby could take Rhonda's child away from her while she was standing there, not allow her to talk to her, not allow any of these mothers the opportunity to protect their children. So the point of the book was to weave many of these things together, to elevate, to bring you into the conversations that we have, in order to steal the connection and to make bearing witness something that people are not only willing to do, they want to do. You have to tell the story. So the concepts are there. The stories go along with the concepts. The stories help you understand what the concepts are about. The concepts help you name the story, which is the reason why they're trying to erase the concepts. That's why they've attacked intersectionality. That's why they are attacking these ideas. Attacking our stories, our knowledge, our history is the gateway to attacking us. Taking away the power of our narrative is taking away power from us. That's precisely why, the fight has got to be a fight over telling our stories and a fight over our concepts. We can't let that be taken away from us.
And Ms. Dormis, I'm keen to hear from where you sit now. I mean, when you talk about this idea of qualified immunity, something you didn't know about, but you got very familiar and educated on it. I mean, the idea that was the reason, or at least the reason used to reverse the decision of a jury of citizens. Talk about that experience.
Well, thank you, Darren. What I've come to learn is that qualified immunity was put in place to protect, what's the term for? It was a doctrine put in place to protect bad behavior. That's basically what it was put there for. And in my case, like Kim Yancey stated and Dr. Kim stated, it was on the table several times before the trial even started. And then for it to be re-established after the trial was over was like a gut punch for me. I mean, because at the end of the day, this officer shot my child in her back after the news media presented information that she took a first shot at him. So if you're saying that you saw somebody aiming a gun at you and you shot them in their back, how is it that you saw a gun being aimed at you? And the fact that qualified immunity, it should be for people who deserve to be protected. But this guy knew that my grandchild was right next to my daughter. And he took a shot blindly through a wall, in his own words, hoping to hit her in her head. Shooting my grandson not once but twice. My grandson has scars that he has to live with for the rest of his life. That's going to be a constant reminder of his experience. So again, qualified immunity is something that really needs to be taken off the table, because at the end of the day, it is a catalyst for bad behavior, period.
Thank you. So, my sister Kim, how do you, as a person who is constantly scrutinized, attacked, monitored, pilloried, your name bantered around during state legislature policy discussions. You are under an enormous microscope. And on the one hand, it must mean you are being effective.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, the human toll, the toll on you as a person who has been willing to be brave and courageous, often without support, and even when it was during those heady days when when some people were doing the performative thing of stepping up and saying, we're about Black Lives Matter and racial justice, and here's a check.
That came and went, right?
That has passed.
That
Yes.
is.
That has passed.
Yes.
And yet you're still here continuing the fight, but without a lot of support and without the validation of some of those people who headed for the hills once things in the kitchen got real hot.
Yes.
So talk about how you managed through it all, and what gives you reasons for hope.
Ooh, well, thank you for asking that. I guess I want to say a couple things. You know, I grew up with race men and women of the 20th century. Their constant commitment was not to shield me from anything and not to lower the expectation around anything. For them, we were in a constant struggle to better our circumstance. And it was our responsibility to be ready for the opportunities that came and to speak out against the things that are reminiscent of what we were coming out of. So that basically been the message from the earliest period of time. No guarantee that it was going to be easy. Always the recognition that it was going to be bumpy, but always the recognition that we had the resources that we needed in order to survive. So I carried that, you know, with me. I am their child, and it, you know, I don't have the option. I don't feel like I have the option not to. But I will be honest about this. There's nothing that the Manhattan Institute and Heritage can, all of those people can do that really deeply gets under my skin. Because they're on message. They're following the ideologies that they have tested and tried and found to be true methods to win their vision of what this country is supposed to be. So I give it to them. They're on point. What's harder is when our side is not on point. What's harder was, you know, hearing so many people say, "Oh, no, we don't do that." That hearing and watching people do the pivot. So you guys want this group of people, or you want to go after 1619? You want to go after critical race theory? You can have it. Just leave us alone. Mm-hmm. As though it was really about CRT 1619, a book, a title. It's not about the specific. It's about all of us. They're going after the entire infrastructure of democracy, of racial justice, of inclusion. So saying this since 2020, like, hey, where is everybody? Come on, let's go. and a lot of people doing the, what do you mean we? You know, that has been more challenging than dealing with the other side. I always want to think that around the next corner is going to be the thing that everybody's going to say, oh, it really is about all of us. Oh, we are all going to start rowing in the same direction. Oh, we are going to show up for freedom to learn, and we are going to defend African American studies, not the purged version, but the one that has everything in it, including intersectionality and Black Lives Matter. We're going to move in the same direction. I want to think that we're in that moment. I want to think that with like Project 2025, do you all know what Project 2025 is? If you don't, go read it now. Project 2025 is about taking away our ability to actually collect any kind of race, gender data, so we can't talk about disparate impact and discrimination. It's about taking away discrimination, you know, so rewriting parts of Title VII to take away the ability to even make a claim of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. It's about taking away the ability to have federal employees who are not party regulars. It's about abolishing the Department of Education. I mean, so think of the most extremist list of possibilities you can possibly come up with. Write it down in a 900-page document. Have 100 organizations, 900 pages, 100 organizations signing on to it, and having this be the platform and the contract that will go into place if they get their wishes. We need to know what's in that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to tell you what to do when you find out, but you need to find out. So that's the kind of thing that is distressing when we don't know. What gives me hope is when people come to the table to know. So hopefully this week, May 3rd, will be our second annual Freedom to Learn activation. We're going to start at the Library of Congress, because that represents the pushback against the effort to deprive us of our knowledge. The fact that we have more banned books now than ever before. 30% of those are written by LGBTQ people and people of color. The most banned books are The Bluest Eye, you know, and our boys aren't blue, right? So we want to march from the Library of Congress to the Supreme Court to remind people that 70 years ago, Brown versus Board of Education, when it struck down segregation, it struck it down because it undermines democracy. Having an apartheid education undermines the ability of Black people to live and survive in this country. We want to draw the connection, because if we don't refuse this U-turn, we're going to find ourselves exactly back in that position. If we have something to say about it, the time to say it is now. That's what keeps me going.
On some levels, though, as a legal scholar and as a scholar of history, it does feel like for many we are sleepwalking into a sense of authoritarianism, and I mean that you can see the train wreck.
Yes.
Coming.
And one of the reasons you've been so effective is because you through your institute, have been able to bring together both policy and practice and activism and the mobilization that needs to accompany the knowledge. Do you see right now that capacity to bring all of that together?
I will be honest. After the Supreme Court's decision in SFFA, this is the anti-affirmative action decision that happened last June, I've been shocked about how willing so many of our institutions have been to just give it all up, just erase all of it. With the idea that we want to be safe. We don't want to be in the newspapers. We don't want to have to worry about some of these people coming after us. If I think every day, if we had half of the gumption and half of the willingness to fight for our values and our way of life that the massive resistors did after Brown versus Board of Education was decided, we'd be in a completely different place right now. These lawsuits in this case has nothing to do with programs that target racially inequitable conditions in society. They have nothing to do with supporting organizations and opportunities and pipelines that actually have some chance of doing something to close these gaps within the next 2 centuries. We are giving them the victory by saying, oh, we're going to get rid of all of our racially targeted programs. So I look at it and there's distress because as soon as we get rid of that, they're going to come after something else. This is not a monster that can be satiated. In fact, the more we give to it, the more it demands. So I look for those institutions that have stayed the course. I am thrilled to be sitting in the middle of one of those institutions, grateful beyond measure that I can continue doing the work that I do, but I wish more would follow the lead, of Ford and a few of the others who say we are not going to do this U-turn. We won't go back. It means that you actually have to put your programs, your resources, your commitment to where your values are. And right now, too many of our allies are about appeasing rather than resisting. Yes. We can't survive if we don't fight.
So final word, which you just gave us, but I'm not going to let you get out of here without, as you look at what you have built through the African American Policy Forum, I think your vision is so, one of the reasons when I first heard you talk about it was because we so often diminish and extinguish the dreams of Black women. And what I loved was your unapologetic ambition and your sense that this institution you needed to build has to exist because there isn't anything else like it on the landscape. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why we have felt so loyal in our support, and also so inspired by your level of excellence, which is something that you've always stood for, something that I think those of us who are committed to diversity believe is about excellence. And yet, these narratives, these ideas, these pernicious ideologies that get in the way. So, for 10 years from now, 10 years from now, where can we be if the vision for the Policy Forum and the Institute, where can we be if that ambition is realized?
See, this is what I love about you, Darren. You let a person dream.
Well, that's what we should be doing at Foundation.
That's what we need to be doing.
Yes.
So, number one, 10 years from now, we are not asking and answering the question, so what actually do you imagine and do? Are you about race or are you about gender? Right? Finally, people get that having an intersectional framework is what we were able to embrace to save our democracy. 10 years from now, I would like to be able to say there was a moment where we were worried worried about what was going to happen, but we weren't able to come together as effectively as we could to know that we cannot save our democracy and leave anti-racism and social injustice by the side of the road, and we cannot save anti-racism and defend it against anti-wokeness without saving democracy. So the two finally came together. We came all the way to the edge, came to the abyss, and pulled ourselves back. How did we do it? We did it by recognizing that erasing our history, using the law to do that erasure, packing our courts, creating institutions that create whole blueprints to take our democracy away, that was the vehicle that we had to pull the gas out of. And how did we do it? We took away the complaints and the insecurities that have been so much a condition of this possibility. We took away that idea that the country only belongs to some of us. So those January 6 people who went in and said, we want our country back, we said, okay, who are you talking about? You're talking about people in Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee. These are the people that you're saying don't have a right to determine who sits in the White House. The majority of us believe otherwise. We actually are the majority. We are. But we don't see ourselves as the majority. So we were able, the story 10 years from now should say, to basically send up our flares from every place that we are, to say, we don't support this repression, we don't support this censorship, we don't support this idea of erasing our history, we don't support the idea of erasing ideas, we don't support the idea of erasing our votes. So we might all come at this from one particular issue or another, but together when we shoot up our flag, we light up the sky. And that is who we are. These are the people who are gonna save our democracy. That's what I want 10 years to be able to tell us. And I want it to be able to tell the story of why we are all intersectional now. We are all critical thinkers about race, gender, sexuality, class. We are all pulling these threads together to create a tapestry that better supports our hopes for our democracy.
Please join me in thanking Professor Crenshaw. And please, Rhonda, you get the last word.
Thank you. And that's the last question for Dr. Kim, but I want to make this statement. If you don't get on board and understand what's really going on, it's either going to be the cotton fields for us or Gilead for all. So you make a choice.
And on that note, thank you to these two extraordinary leaders. The book is Say Her Name. Everyone gets a free book signed by Professor Crenshaw. Thank you, thank you. And then we have,
Yes.
please stay with us. We have one more surprise.
So please join me in welcoming Abby Dobson to the stage. Abby Dobson is our Minister of Music, I call her. Many of you will recognize her as the person who sings Say Her Name. So we're going to close out with Say Her Name, and I'm going to ask you each to join us in saying some of the names of the Black women who've been killed by the police. It is part of our ritual of remembrance. Abby.
say her name. Say her name. Say her name. Say her name.
India Kager, say her name. Say her name. Corinne Gaines, say her name. Say her name. Kayla Moore, say her name. Say her name. Shelley Fry, say her name.
Shelley Fry.
Say her name. Denisha Anderson, say her name.
Denisha Anderson.
Say her name.
Denisha Anderson.
Michelle Shirley, say her name.
Michelle Shirley.
Say her name.
Michelle Shirley.
Atiana Jefferson, say her name.
Tiana Jefferson.
Say her name.
Jefferson.
Miriam Carey, say her name.
Miriam Carey.
Say her name.
Miriam Carey.
Laylene Polanco, say her name.
Laylene Polanco.
Say her name.
Laylene Polanco.
Sandra Bland, say her name.
Sandra Bland.
Say her name.
Sandra Bland.
Breonna Taylor, say her name.
Breonna Taylor.
Say her name.
Breonna Taylor.
Pamela Turner, say her name.
Pamela Turner.
Say her name.
Pamela Turner.
Tarika Wilson, say her name.
Rika Wilson.
Say her name.
Rika Wilson.
Ayanna Stanley Jones, say her name.
Ayanna Stanley Jones.
Say her name.
Ayanna Stanley Jones.
Takia Young, say her name.
Kia Young.
Say her name.
Kia Young.
Brianna Greer, say her name.
Brianna Greer.
Say her name.
Brianna Greer.
India Beatty, say her name.
India Beatty.
Say her name.
India Beatty.
Niana Philanson, say her name.
Niana Falansa.
Say her name.
Niana Falansa.
Eleanor Bumpers, say her name.
Eleanor Bumper.
Say her name.
Eleanor Bumper.
Catherine Johnston, say her name.
Catherine Johnson.
Say her name.
Catherine Johnson.
Her name. All the names I'll never know. Say their names. Black girls matter. Say their names. Black women matter. Say her name.
Now I'm going to turn it over to Darren for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
You're going to do your closing?
That was so powerful, so profound. This experience, I hope for all of you, has been powerful and profound. Please join me in thanking Professor Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw.